All right, Marcus, we are live on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. I'm so happy to see you and thank you very much for accepting the invitation and being our guest speaker. It's so wonderful to have you today. How are you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing
How's your
fine, thank
mood?
you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
How's your
Thank you
mood?
for having me. My mood is good. I'm excited to
Great,
talk. I'm ready to talk about my home state of North Carolina.
amazing. Uh, already our first viewer joined us. Good
Fantastic.
evening, dear friends, Bishkek American Center followers. We are so happy to have you today. Thank you very much for joining our session, and we are very excited to continue our virtual programs and particularly virtual US state tours. And today we are going to visit North Carolina. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Marcus Cox, who was born in North Carolina and lives there for 30 years. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina and now he is an IT project manager. Since graduating, has lived in 4 countries on 2 different continents and enjoys exploring the food, culture, cities, and outdoors of the places he has been. And he now lives in Bishkek with his family. So, dear friends, don't forget to send your questions during the live in the comment section, and after the presentation, Marcus will answer them. Thank you very much once again, everybody. So I think we can start, Marcus.
Great. Hello, everyone. As you said, I am from North Carolina, and this is my talk about North Carolina. We'll start off with
Mhm.
where it is in the United States. If you've seen a map of the United States and studied it any, we are in the we'll call the southeast of the United States. You can see the the state that is red, colored in red there on the map, and a little bit closer you can see where it is. Um, we have South Carolina to the south, Virginia to the north, Tennessee to the west, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. So we have a lot of coastline, and we are throughout history have a lot of coastal ships and ports coming into that coastline. There's lots of cities in North Carolina, but the two largest cities, we'd say the most important cities, is first is the capital, Raleigh, which is on the picture. Part of it is a picture on the right. That is the Capitol building in Raleigh, and the other being Charlotte, North Carolina. And they're in two different parts of the state. Raleigh is the capital. It is where many of the universities are around, and where, of course, the government for the state resides. Charlotte is a city that grew up surrounded by a lot of rural and farmland, and it's grown into a larger city where there's a lot of banks. Many banks for the United States are located, headquartered there now, some of the largest ones. And that city is continuing to grow just like Raleigh is. In the state, there's some other cities which are fast growing, but those are clearly definitely the two largest cities we have in the state. The state, as you saw, and I'll go back very quickly to the maps. The state, as you saw, it stretches all the way to the ocean, but to the west, we have a lot of mountains, and these are the Appalachian Mountains. And there's the large mountain range goes through the Appalachians, go through our state, as well as numerous other ones on the East Coast. And we have from the mountains, of course, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. In between is a central called the Piedmont, which is kind of, it's not pronounced the way it is anymore, but it's a French word for basically foot of the mountains. So we have the mountains and heading east, hills and stuff, and then going to the coast all the way to the left. Traditionally, North Carolina has had a lot of different crops and growth. We have large pine forests, pine trees, evergreen trees, with all sorts of products from wood, timber for houses or other things cut from. Also the pitch, so the sap of the pine trees was traditionally used for sealing ships that would be on those coastlines, like I mentioned earlier, and other purposes, burning in oil, lamp. The center section is tobacco. And we have a long history of tobacco farming, crops for mostly cigarettes and other tobacco products. And then then cotton, a number, 100 and some years ago, cotton, and back further than that, cotton was a very important crop, and we had large cotton fields that were made into towels and sheets and other clothing and things like that you would use cotton for. These days, these aren't used and grown as much anymore. Farmers have switched up, and then these days they sort of grow other things. Soybeans, sweet potatoes is another one, and blueberries, and some other crops. Peanuts are still grown a lot in North Carolina. We have a lot of crops and other agriculture products. There's been some animal, chicken farming, pig farming is also still done a lot in North Carolina, mostly in that Piedmont, in that center section, which I talked about. The mountains and the coast don't have as much farming, part of the eastern states, but the coastline doesn't, but the eastern United States does have a fair amount of farming to it. As well as crops and agriculture and other business, we also have very large cultural products, if you call it that, coming out of North Carolina. Many of North Carolina's small cities are big music centers and art centers for the state and as well as the country. Cities like Asheville, the Triangle area, which consists of cities of Raleigh, which is the capital, Durham, and Chapel Hill, have always had been large supporters of the arts and music. And we have some big musicians that have come out in the last, say, 50 years of the North Carolina. Some people who were born in North Carolina, for example, have a long history of influencing and having artists in the jazz and blues, and as you see, funk categories. And for the people from left to right, you see John Coltrane, Nina Simone, and George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic fame, all artists, amazing artists in their own rights and different styles and different people. We have a lot more, some more modern artists coming out, and quite the history of a lot of famous musicians and some artists coming out of there. A lot of that has to do with some of the towns I mentioned, which have big universities, and North Carolina has many universities within the state. It has the oldest university, which you see some of there, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is the one I graduated from, which was mentioned earlier. And so we have that one and numerous other parts of the North Carolina university system. Some private universities, you see a picture of what's called Duke Chapel at Duke University there on the right. And they're both big medical research universities, for one, as well as other arts and journalism and other large programs that they have there. As well as the academic programs, like I just mentioned, we also have a number of sports, and sports is in North Carolina in general, if you were born there or raised there, you sort of have favorite sports teams from the teams that are in North Carolina. And that's because one of the reasons is they're very good teams. Lots of people came out of there. The center you see is Michael Jordan, a famous basketball player for the NBA in the United States. College basketball, the person on the right, I think it looks like maybe Mia Hamm, who is a world famous soccer player. She played for the national women's soccer team. She played at the University of North Carolina. And they're just all basically the tops of their fields in sports. And they also from North Carolina. People ask sometimes, what else from North Carolina? I think people from North Carolina always talk about the food, and I think people from the southeastern United States always talk about their food. So that's another thing from North Carolina that I'm one to be proud of, and also think about a lot. I don't drink much Pepsi, but that is a product that is from North Carolina. The right are black-eyed peas, what they call black-eyed peas. And it's another type of just bean, legume, agricultural product from North Carolina. that is just eaten all over. There's a sandwich there between the bread, and that's pulled pork barbecue. So that's pork barbecue. That is another tradition of taking the pig and roasting it for a long time over low heat and with smoke and flavoring it. So the smoked flavors that you might be used to of a smoked trout or a smoked fish or something like that, the same sort of process is used, but on a different animal. Some things about North Carolina, just a few statistics, just so you can understand some of them. The population's a little over between 10 and 11 million people. We're the 9th largest state of all the 50 states in the United States. Although we're not one of the largest by land size in the states. For the people there, 71% identify as white American, 22% as African American, and just under 2% in some of them are Native American Indian, about 3% Asian, and about 9%, I'm sorry, not 10%, 9% Hispanic or Latino origins of any race from there. And those numbers are always changing, growing, fluctuating. People come to North Carolina, people leave North Carolina, but it's growing in a very diverse way. Most of the state, over half the state, is still agricultural, or we'll call rural. Small towns, houses sort of out in the middle of just big areas of land, and the rest of it being the cities. High concentrations in those 2 large cities of Raleigh and Charlotte that I mentioned before. For the weather, we have roughly high temperatures, 32 degrees in Celsius, and then about -1 degree in January, in the coldest time of the year there. That's I think that's similar to Bishkek. I think, although it gets colder, much colder, but I think the summers are almost equally as hot, from what I understand. I could be totally wrong, but that's my understanding. And so that's that. So what we have, as you can see, we have a lot of different places, the mountains, the oceans. It's not a very big state, but it has a lot going on. The people, the places, very different, but all very much what I call North Carolina. And so even though that's not always the same, it's still, to me, home. Are there any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marcus, for the amazing presentation and for the wonderful trip to North Carolina.
Thank you.
How long are you in Bishkek? Did you have time to explore Bishkek city?
Not so much. I've been here since middle of September. So I've been here just 1 month. And I have explored only a little because I just haven't had much time to get out right now. I am trying to be cautious about the coronavirus happening right now. I am trying to be careful. And I have my family I'm helping take care of, and that is keeping me busy. I do want to explore. I can't wait to get out and see more of the city, see more of the country. And I just got outside of Bishkek this weekend and did a little hiking and walking around, and I'm excited to see more.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marcus. So the next question, how do other people call people from North Carolina?
We would call each other North Carolinians. There is a nickname in North Carolina, which has an interesting story. And if you want, I can point you to it. We are called the Tar Heel State. And there's a whole bunch, there's many stories about why that might be. Mostly some deal with that, talk about that pitch and that tar and sticky pine sap that I talked of earlier as part of the older things that we manufactured there. And so that was sort of a story behind that. So we might call each other Tar Heels, but really just North Carolinians, I think. I can't think of anything that might be very funny or strange off the top of my head. But Tar Heels is pretty strange. I can try to put that up at some point if people want to see where to look that up.
Interesting. Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah.
What makes unique North Carolina state?
Wow. I would say what makes it unique partially is where we're situated in the United States. We're sort of in the middle of that East Coast, even though people would say it's the South, the Southeast. And so we have a lot of the traditions and culture of what people think of as the South, but we're just on that line of being towards the north part of the state too. And also, I really think the geography, which I mentioned, we have the mountains in the west and the ocean into the east, and so that makes it makes for very different people. People who grow up in the mountains don't think and act quite like the people who grew up on the ocean or on the beach down there. And so while we can be very different in the way we grew up, we're still North Carolinians, and I think we find that we all have the same pride in our state, and think about the state in similar ways, even though we grew up in very different places.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Marcus.
Sure.
One more question.
Okay.
What are some good tips for tourists for better exploring the North Carolina?
Sure. Good tips for tourists. There's a lot of information available, and North Carolina is a state that has a lot of tourists, and people tend to go, like I said, either towards the mountains or towards the ocean. Typically, tourists do that. There's a lot of history, but there's also a lot of just interesting, nice places to go. So tips for tourists: try to see it all. It's kind of it's long. I mean, you can drive from across the whole state if you, for example, in 8 hours, or on the train for a few hours, or something like that. But it can be seen, and I think there's a lot of interesting things on both sides and everywhere in between. But yeah, try the food, meet the people. I think Americans, and definitely people in North Carolina in general, will just talk to you. If they find out you're a visitor and are interested, they will just be happy to talk to you and sort of tell you if you're in their town. They will be happy to tell you the history of their town or tell you about that. Just be open and be friendly, and I think you would have a good time there. There's lots of interesting things to do.
Do you have favorite place, or what is your favorite place in North Carolina?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I like the mountains the most. Although I didn't live in the mountains or the coast when I grew up. I lived in between in that Piedmont area, which it's called, and that's of course where I went to school. I spent a lot of my life there. But the mountains are good for being outdoors. Like this time of year, they've got lots of colors in the trees. It's just a beautiful, peaceful place where the air is clean, it's just, you can be out there and be with people or be all alone if you want to. I think that's my favorite kind of spot to go through. And it was never very far from my home, so I could get there very easily.
It seems that hiking is the most popular outdoor activity.
I don't doubt it at all. Yeah, I think it would be. I could see hiking or mountain biking being the two big outdoor activities. But yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I'm sure.
Great.
Yeah, definitely popular.
Question.
Sure.
What are the top universities in North Carolina? I
Oh.
know Missouri University. What is the status of that university?
The top universities in North Carolina, I would say, are in that area which I mentioned of Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham. Those are the three biggest schools in North Carolina, and those would be North Carolina Chapel Hill, the one I went to, North Carolina State University, or NCSU, as it's sometimes called, and then Duke University. And those are the top, I would say, the top universities at the school, some of the biggest. But there's a lot of parts of the university system, which is a number of universities for North Carolina, which are all, I think, all good schools. They have different concentrations. Different schools are more math oriented or certain sciences oriented. The one in University of, say, Wilmington, being so close to the ocean, has a very good science program based on studying the ocean and other things like that. But they're all very good. I'm not as familiar with Missouri. I've been to Missouri or through Missouri, but I don't have a lot of knowledge of the University of Missouri's schools. I know there's a number of them. There's a lot of universities and colleges in the United States, but I'm not as familiar with those programs.
I see. I always have a habit to call Missouri, but it calls like Missouri, yes.
Missouri, and the thing is, people in North Carolina probably would pronounce it a different way too. I mean, we have a few different dialects and the way people talk. I don't sound very much like I'm from North Carolina, people would say, but I am. So,
What make it like different from other dialects? What make North Carolina dialect, I mean, different from others?
A lot of people would say that people from North Carolina or maybe from the South in general talk a little bit slower, a little more deliberate, maybe. They tend to slow down and talk and just take their time talking. Not that it's not less or more intelligent than anywhere else, but it's just taking their time, slowing down, and just telling their story. That's my experience, I think, and the way I would think about it.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Marcus.
Thank you.
One more question. If autumn looks the same in North Carolina as in Kyrgyzstan?
So I've only been here a month, but I'm seeing my trees and around me, some change color. And I was just outside a little bit of Bishkek. Yes, was it yesterday? 2 days ago. And yes, the colors in the hills that I saw are changing, and it looks very much like that fall. The fall in North Carolina and the fall in Bishkek are looking a lot alike. It's nice to see. It reminds me of home and seeing fall colors. So it's nice to see the trees changing color and feel the crisp. The air is a little cooler and we'd say crisp, and feel that. So it has some similarities. Yeah.
Does North Carolina have 4 seasons?
It does. It does very much. Although we don't get a lot of snow. We have and we do, but it's never very deep unless you're in the mountains. In the mountains gets plenty of snow, but the rest of the state doesn't get very much. Our summers are hot, and the springs are. I think spring is just what you'd call the typical flowers blooming, things turning green, life returning to normal after the winter, and fall definitely, like I just described, very similar to for what I've seen here. Yeah, so it has 4 seasons for sure,
It's amazing.
which is
It's amazing to observe the change.
yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Marcus. One more question. Thank you for this presentation, Marcus. What places would you recommend for parents in North Carolina to take kids?
Places. I think I would name towns. There's lots of neat towns all over. Some of the smaller towns that are still look like they did maybe 50 years ago or more are interesting to see, although there maybe not as many people living there these days. But the area I mentioned was around the universities are good for kids because there's lots of arts and museums, even children's museums, and things to see and things to do. I would take my children, of course, out into the mountains for camping and exploring and hiking. And there's lots of small and not so small anymore cities there that are great to see. Asheville is one of them around that area. And just a lot of that. The beaches, I take my kids to the beach there when I'm back home. And so those are great places to be with children.
Mhm.
There's lots to do and lots of things to do.
Thank you, Marcos, for recommendations.
Sure.
One more question. Why do you love North Carolina?
The easy answer is that it's just home. It's where I'm
Mhm.
from. Um, the bigger answer might be that all those things that make it home, like family and uh, food
Mhm.
and the place where I grew up and the culture and the different things I've talked about, the nature I've talked about, the arts and the all the music and all that. That's just why I love it. It's just like, thankfully it's also home. I mean, so there's back to the easy answer. It's always home, but all those things I talked about um, are just why I love it.
Mhm.
It's familiar. You know,
Mhm.
it's who I am and where I'm from. Um,
Like sweet home.
yeah, home sweet home.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marcus.
You're welcome.
One more question.
Sure.
What are interesting facts about North Carolina that you can't find in internet? Please
Oh,
share.
I think you can find everything on the internet these days, right? Interesting things about North Carolina. Um, I, I think I don't know if I have a fact, but I think any interesting thing about North Carolina or anywhere you live, and people ask me when I go to live in another country, for example, um,
Mhm.
what it's like. The people are the things you can't read about on the internet. The talking with people, meeting people, um, things like that. It's so like when I go live in another country, people often maybe they visit for a week or
Mhm.
they spend 3 days in some place overseas that's not the United States, and you get a feel for it, right? But you don't truly understand it until you've lived there or um, spend some time getting to know people from there or
Mhm.
the people around you. And I think that's sort of the maybe the secret thing. And maybe it just doesn't just apply to North Carolina, but applies to everywhere you go. Because you can go into a museum or you can go into a store or you can walk around the city or walk around the hiking trails. But until you get to know why the people live there and continue to live there and have their children there and raise families there, you may not truly understand it. You know, and that's sort of I guess part of the reasons we do these talks. I mean, you have a person from North Carolina, and that's why you can get to know me, but you know as well as you can over the internet. And I think that's the secret that people you can't find online. People may say it, oh, talk to people, but you know, I think that's the secret.
Mhm. Yes, you're right. Thank you very much, Marcus. One more question.
Well, thank you. Oh, okay.
Is it is it expensive or cheap to live or study in North Carolina?
Oh, um, I think you can um, live cheaply in North Carolina.
Mhm.
Um, the education system is, it's hard to say. There's lots of good schools, and like the school that I went to, University, is a state school, so it is the state, so it's a public school, but it's very well known in the United States, and so for the cost and graduating from that school is not is I would say is not the balance is not very expensive. That is for the education and the recognition you get from being a graduate there. Um, it's definitely a good deal. It's not expensive. I mean, however, you know, everyone has has their budget they must live in, right? So expensive can be something for one person and not and something different for another
Mhm.
person. But on the whole, it's not a very expensive state. I mean, or place. The cities, of course, get to be more
Mhm.
expensive, houses and
Mhm.
apartments there. But it's but on the whole, I would say it's one of the less expensive states
Mhm.
to be able to live in, just
Mhm.
depending on where you are.
Uh-huh. Thank you very much, Marcos, for
Thank
your
you.
answer.
Yeah,
Have you been in all 50 states?
I haven't. I have not. I've been in. I counted this one time and I don't remember, but I've been in a lot of the states on the East Coast and a lot of states on the West Coast, and some in between, but not as many in between. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it it's sometimes hard to get to all of them. If people, I talk about, it would take 8 hours to drive across the state of North Carolina from east to
Mm-hmm.
west. And
Wow.
in some places, I've lived in places I could drive across the country almost in that time, right? So it's a big place, and getting around it is can be expensive,
Mm-hmm.
or also just hard to do because of the size. But I would like to visit all the 50 states. Each state has a lot of interesting things to do it, and the people are all different, Americans, but all different, and it's
Mm-hmm.
good to experience that. I wish one day I will. I'll try.
Yes, thank you very much,
Thank
Marcus.
you.
One more question.
Oh,
What kind of sport is famous in North Carolina? Baseball, soccer, basketball?
so, if you ask most people, it's going to be for college, and a lot of people watch the colleges and universities. It's going to be basketball in the university level. North Carolina also has a professional American football team, um, and so that also popular. And the soccer, what we'll call soccer, is much more popular,
Mm-hmm.
especially because the universities in North Carolina are producing very, very high level athletes in soccer, especially in the women's soccer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I would say that. So it depends on who you ask, but if you really talk to people, most people have their university affiliations, even if they've never been to that university or didn't go. They might still be a fan of that university basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
At least when I was growing up, that was the
It's
thing to do.
cool. It's cool. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Marcos. This was
Thanks.
our last question,
Okay.
and it was really wonderful to have you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
having
much
me.
for the fascinating presentation. Everything was very useful and interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also, I would like to say thank you to our viewers who send us their questions and leave their comments. Thank you for your active participation. And it's time to say goodbye. And thank you, everybody. Have a great evening and see you in our next sessions. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.